then it's the small traders who get cheated. And that's what always worries me. So right now, for example, if you trade in stocks, you know that pump and dumps are illegal. You know that a broker has to come through with what the broker promised, and you'll be insured if the broker runs away with all the money. Those are things that are not there in crypto. So this is about putting some basic rules in place so that anyone can trade with just some basic confidence that the biggest kinds of scams will have a cop on the beat to blow the whistle and put a stop to it.
And that raises the question of who is the cop on the beat, or who gets to decide who the cop on the beat is? I mean, is it the SEC? Is it the CFTC? Do we need you up in Congress to tell us?
You know, I think that's a good question, and the answer is right now, we don't have any cops on the beat to speak of, and there are going to be, I think, a lot of different approaches. So Gensler is now talking about what the SEC can do, but there are other spaces for other actors depending on how you think crypto plays out, whether you see it as a currency, whether you see it as an investment. That means you really put it back on Congress. So ultimately, I think it's important for Congress to do its job, but in the meantime, I think it's important for each of our regulators to step up and take hold of the piece that's within their jurisdiction.
So, Senator, you understand this area so well. From your point of view, give us a sense of what the biggest advantage, the biggest upside to cryptocurrency is, and the biggest risk to cryptocurrency.
Sure. So the biggest upside to cryptocurrency could be expansion or democratization of access to the financial system. You know, right now in the United States, we have tens of millions of people who are either unbanked or underbanked, which means they have to go to check cashers and pay 3% of their paycheck just to get their cash. They have to pay money in order to make a payment on their utilities or to pay their rent payment. And that's costing those people a lot. It is possible that moving to a digital currency system, or I should say expanding to a digital currency system, could bring in more people. And there are a lot of different ways that could be designed. The downside, of course, is so long as it's an unregulated system, you may be pulling more people in so that they can get cheated. And that's not what we want.
When we talk about risk to the system overall, obviously we think about the Federal Reserve and its role, because it's not only a supervisor of monetary policy, but as you know better than anyone, it also is supposed to be regulating the banks. As we look to the expiration of the first term of Jay Powell, the chair, what should we be emphasizing, monetary policy or regulation?
Look, I think they're both important. And here's the thing, you can get somebody who's good on monetary policy, but they could also be good on regulation. I want somebody who does both. And I've raised concerns with now Chairman Powell since he was nominated about his attitude toward regulation.
So, Senator, as you talk about somebody who can do both, I think at least about Lael Brainerd, because she's spoken out on regulation as well. Is that somebody who conceivably might be the appropriate person to do both monetary policy and regulation?
So, look, I don't want to speculate on for particular jobs, but I read Lael Brainerd's dissents in many of the deregulatory actions that the Fed has taken, and I have to say, they are strong and powerful dissents. She makes a good case for why it is the job of the Federal Reserve to be that cop on the beat and to make sure that the largest financial institutions are not putting our economy at greater risk.
Senator, really appreciate your time with us today. It was very helpful. That's Senator Elizabeth Warren. She, of course, is Democrat of Massachusetts.
And Senator Warren spoke there with David Weston on Bloomberg's Balance of Power. You can catch the show weekdays at noon Eastern on Bloomberg Radio and Television. On today's program, David sits down with Republican Senator Shelley Moore Capito of West Virginia. Looking ahead to the market open on this Thursday morning, S&P futures are up 8 points. Dow futures up 38. NASDAQ futures up 34 points. The 10-year Treasury is up 1/32 now. The yield 1.17% on the 10-year note, and the yield on the 2-year 0.18%. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
This is a Bloomberg.
If knowledge is power, the Bloomberg Terminal is your power up, connecting you to real-time financial data, market-moving news, powerful analytics and an influential network of financial decision makers around the world. Share ideas, negotiate trades, and gain the insight you need to make more informed decisions. See how the terminal can take your workflow to the next level at Bloomberg.com/professional.
Minute. Many Uber drivers quit early on in the pandemic, and now that vaccines are bringing the riders back, there are not enough drivers. Uber spent a lot of money in an attempt to lure workers back to the job in the spring, and that led to a larger than predicted loss of $509 million. Uber has taken time during the pandemic to expand further beyond rides, betting on freight and grocery and alcohol delivery. The CEO of the Booking Group of travel websites says he's confident about a strong recovery in travel demand. Said the surge of coronavirus cases led to a minor pullback in reservations in July. Still, Booking reported a better than expected surge in room night reservations in the latest quarter. They were up 458% for the first positive year-over-year growth since before the pandemic. We'll get another snapshot of the labor picture today with the jobless claims out before the opening bell. The ADP payroll numbers that came out yesterday for July were a big disappointment. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
Burden LLP Accountants and Advisors presents Tax Chat with Mayor Mintz, partner and co-leader of Burden's real estate practice.
Whether it's because of the COVID-19 pandemic or not, it is essential for anyone negotiating a deal to understand the underlying economic assumptions and the current market. From buying or selling assets to forming a joint venture, it's important to work with a sophisticated tax advisor who understands how the changing tax law may impact the structure of the deal. At Burden, we leverage our more than 100 years of transactional experience to help guide clients through the complexities of these structures and ensure that they understand any potential tax impact. If you're a high net worth individual or business owner, let Burden help protect you, your family, and your business.
For more Tax Chat from Burden, visit burdenllp.com. That's BERDONLLP.com. Burden Accountants and Advisors. We listen, we solve, we do.
Hey, Dad, your prescription will be ready in just a minute. Hey, Dad, your laundry will be ready in just a minute. Dad, your lunch will be ready in just a minute.
Hey, honey, why don't you take a minute? When you help care for a loved one, you give them as much time as you can, making sure they're safe and comfortable. But it's just as important that you take some time for yourself. At AARP, we can help with information and useful tips on how you can maintain a healthy life balance, care for your own physical and mental well-being, and manage the challenges of caring for a loved one. Because the better care you take of yourself, the better care you can provide for your loved one.
Thanks, Dad.
Thank you. You're there for them. We're here for you. Find free care guides to support you and your loved one at aarp.org/caregiving. That's aarp.org/caregiving. A public service announcement brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
For the Jewish Communal Fund, Barbara Novick, investment professional and philanthropist.
I think JCF has one of the best funds out there. It's very reasonable in its pricing, it's very flexible in its investments, and I give them an A+ for client service.
A fund may be opened with a $5,000 contribution of cash or appreciated securities and can be used as an alternative to a private foundation. At any time, you may suggest which charities you would like to support and in what amounts. Choose from the menu of high-rated investment options, and your charitable fund can earn tax-free income.
It's a very client-centric organization. They have a very user-friendly website, and I find they make my life easier.
Let the Jewish Communal Fund be your personal connection to charitable giving. Open a JCF fund now to lock in this year's tax deduction. Call 212-752-8277, 212-752-8277, or visit jcfny.org.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions. We're such an easy-to-access source for financial news.
Does that not seem insane?
You may want to pile up some papers and tell people you read them.
What did the company say about new programming?
Bloomberg Markets, weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
It is 6:30 on Wall Street. Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. We're just about 3 hours away from the open of U.S. trading. Let's get you up to date on the news you need to know at this hour. The pandemic remains front and center this morning. The Delta variant is picking up steam with a rapid spread around the world. Let's get the very latest live with Bloomberg's Renita Young. Good morning, Renita.
Good morning, Karen. The Delta variant is driving a new wave of lockdowns as the global case count now tops 200 million. China imposed new travel restrictions. Tokyo set a new daily record where cases rose above 5,000 for the first time. A week-long lockdown covering most of Australia begins today. And here in the U.S., the 7-day average for new infections is climbing closer to 100,000. That's on the heels of reports that the White House may start requiring vaccines for foreign visitors. In New York, I'm Renita Young, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Renita, thank you. We get another indication on how the pandemic is affecting the labor market today. Weekly jobless claims come out 2 hours from now. Economists forecast more than 380,000 people filed for unemployment.
In Europe today, the Bank of England is forecast to hold policies steady, but may outline plans to unwind government bond purchases. Stay tuned for that policy decision in 30 minutes from now.
All right, turning to earnings, shares of Uber are down more than 4% now after the ride-hailing company reported disappointing results. Here with more is Bloomberg's John Tucker.
To get drivers to drive, Uber had to pay more, and that resulted in a wider loss than expected. The loss before interest, tax, and other expenses was $509 million. The results call into question the company's long-term labor model. Uber also cautioned that a wider outbreak of the Delta variant could change future results. Uber has used the pandemic to expand beyond rides. They placed a big bet on freight with the purchase of Transplace, and they also have moved into grocery and alcohol delivery. In New York, I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, thank you, John. We'll have much more on Uber coming up when we talk live with CEO Derek Khosrowshahi. Tune in for that at 9 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg Radio and Television.
And we have earnings from Moderna out right now. Results from the drug maker beating estimates thanks to more than $4 billion in sales from its COVID vaccine. The company is also announcing a share buyback.
At the same time, Moderna is out with new data on its shot. A final analysis of the late-stage study shows Moderna's vaccine remains 93% effective 6 months after the second dose. That suggests the vaccine's protection remains stable long after recipients complete the 2-dose regimen.
Looking at Moderna shares right now, up 0.2% in early trading. Straight ahead, your latest local headlines, plus a check of sports. And this is Bloomberg.
6:33 on Wall Street. Michael Barr is back with more on what's going on in New York and around the world. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Nathan. Calls continue to intensify for New York Governor Andrew Cuomo to resign. 4 separate prosecutors have launched criminal probes after a report says he sexually harassed 11 women. Lindsay Boylan, one of the first women to come forward, is planning to file a civil suit against the governor. Her lawyer is Jill Basinger.
When people are brave enough to come forward, it is not okay to try and destroy them. And that's what Lindsay's goal is right now, to send that message as clearly as she can.
Basinger spoke to ABC. Cuomo has maintained his innocence. Randy Weingarten, the president of the American Federation of Teachers, worked with Cuomo and served on his Education Reform Commission. She says that the governor has no choice but to resign.
I say this more in sadness than anything else since I've known the governor for many years. What Attorney General James found was that the governor's conduct was repugnant.
Weingarten also says reinstating masks and social distancing in schools will help ensure that schools remain open. Landlords have filed a legal challenge against President Biden's eviction ban. According to a filing from the Alabama Association of Realtors, the extension of the coronavirus eviction moratorium goes against a ruling by the U.S. Supreme Court in July. On Tuesday, the CDC extended a ban on evictions in areas of the country with substantial and high transmission of COVID-19. New Jersey's governor had words for a group of anti-vaccine demonstrators who tried to crash a bill signing event yesterday. Protesters could be heard booing as Governor Phil Murphy urged people to get vaccinated to turn back the rising number of COVID cases in the state. Finally, Murphy decided he had enough.
You've lost your minds. You are the ultimate knuckleheads, and because of what you are saying and standing for, people are losing their life. People are losing their life, and you have to know that. Look in the mirror.
Governor Murphy spoke at an event in Union City where he signed a new law extending the state's eviction moratorium. The Biden administration is taking the first steps toward requiring nearly all foreign visitors to the U.S. be vaccinated for the coronavirus. According to a White House official, the requirement would come as part of the administration's phased approach to easing travel restrictions for foreign citizens to the country. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Michael, thank you. Almost 6:36 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg Sports Update. Here's John Stashower.
Thanks, Nathan. The Yankees right now scrambling to find able bodies as starting pitchers with so many either hurt or on the COVID list. They did have one of their regulars on the mound. Jamison Tyon's been great lately. He struck out 10. The Yanks and Orioles were 3-3 in the seventh inning. Yanks took the lead and then added to it.
Swung on a little fly ball in shallow right field, and it dumps in for a base hit. 2-run score. Here comes a third run. He scores. It is a 3-run double. A 3-run bases-clearing double by Stanton.
On WFAN, they made it 7-3. Yanks won 10-3. So after they had only 3 hits on Monday, 23 runs in the 2-game since falls. Seattle tonight. Just that the Yanks were tied 3-3, seventh inning. The Mets and Marlins in Miami, 3-3 in the eighth. Javi Baez with his second home run with his new team, and a much-needed 5-3 win for the Mets. They lead the Phillies by a game and a half. Max Scherzer, winning pitcher for his new team, the Dodgers, who have now also signed veteran Cole Hamels. The Knicks are getting Kemba Walker, and it won't cost them too much. He had $74 million left in a contract bought out by Oklahoma City. Knicks have themselves a new backcourt. Walker and the recently signed Evan Fournier. Spencer Dinwiddie came an all-star with the Nets. He has signed with Washington. In Tokyo, Kevin Durant continues to lead the U.S. to victory. 23 points. Devin Booker added 20. The U.S. beat Australia 97-78. Will play France or Slovenia for the gold medal. Women's soccer won the bronze, beat Australia 4-3. John Stashower with Bloomberg Sports. Nathan.
All right, John, thank you. 6:37 on Wall Street. Time to take a look at stocks. Some of the names moving in the pre-market with Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson. And Dave, it looks like Uber investors aren't exactly hailing the latest earnings.
It sure doesn't look that way, Nathan. I mean, you've got the ride-hailing service down 4.5% in early trading. Uber posted a wider second quarter loss before interest and taxes than analysts expected in a Bloomberg survey. And, of course, these numbers came out a day after we heard from U.S. rival Lyft, which actually had its first adjusted profit in the second quarter. So quite the disappointment there. And another disappointment came out of Roku. It's down 8.5%. The streaming video company's active customer accounts and hours watched fell short of second quarter estimates. Roku citing a shift toward dining and travel as COVID-19 restrictions eased.
All right, so those are a couple disappointing earnings results, but overall the earnings picture has been really good coming out of this quarter, Dave.
Yeah, it has. And, you know, if you want to talk about travel, Nathan, you got Booking Holdings up 2%. The online travel service reported faster growth in second quarter reservations than analysts predicted, and revenue beat projections, though earnings came up short. You got Ford up 3%, General Motors up 1.5%. President Joe Biden will call for 50% of all vehicles sold in the U.S. to be emission-free by 2030. That's according to senior administration officials and a White House fact sheet. An executive order is due later today. We just got results a few moments ago out of the COVID-19 vaccine maker Moderna. And they're pretty much positive that the shares are actually down more than 1%. Second quarter earnings and revenue exceeded estimates. Moderna said it shot at 93% effective after 6 months. Instead, it will complete a filing for full U.S. approval this month. If that wasn't enough, they're buying back as much as $1 billion of stock. Rival Novavax up 4.5%. It's up for a second day after signing a contract to supply 200 million doses of its COVID-19 vaccine to the European Union. Novavax rose yesterday by about 19%. Becton Dickinson sticking with healthcare up 1.5%. The medical supplier raised its fiscal year earnings forecast after third quarter results beat estimates. You've also got some well-received figures out of Regeneron Pharmaceuticals. This is the maker of eye treatment Eylea and eczema medicine Dupixent. Regeneron up 2% in early trading. Electronic Arts up 3.5%. The video game maker had fiscal first quarter results that beat estimates and said the latest version of its Battlefield game, one of its franchises, will debut in time for the holidays. Finally, Fastly falling 21.5% lower. The internet software maker posted second quarter revenue to miss estimates and said an outage that hurt results will also weigh on its third quarter and year.
All right, Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson, thanks as always. S&P futures up almost 9 points. Dow futures up 51. NASDAQ futures up 29. This is Bloomberg.
What's the true value?
The world's financial decision makers connect on the Bloomberg terminal. The buy side and the sell side together, collaborating across markets and countries in real time, sharing ideas, negotiating trades, and forming an influential network of over 325,000 financial professionals that helps power global markets. Isn't it time you join them? Request a demo at bloomberg.com/professional.
Value of your custodial relationship. Ben Harrison of BNY Mellon's Pershing explains.
As sophisticated investors demand more from their advisors, advisory firms in turn need to rely on their custodian to help them grow their complex businesses. At BNY Mellon's Pershing, supporting the rapid growth of RIAs is our #1 priority. We understand what it means to deliver true value to our clients who are looking for a custodian that is aligned with their best interest and delivers high-value solutions, all in an open architecture environment with flexibility, choice, and transparency. Learn why so many of the largest advisory firms turn to us for the financial strength, resiliency, and high-touch service that BNY Mellon Pershing provides. When you work with Pershing, we put your business first. Can your custodian say that?
Learn more at Pershing.com or call 800-445-4467. Pershing Advisor Solutions, LLC. Member FINRA SIPC.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, President of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
This is a Bloomberg Pursuits look at luxury. It's a good time to be in the luxury goods business. Prada has joined luxury peers LVMH, Richemont, and Kering in reporting recovered sales for high-priced goods. Hermès' revenue more than doubled, surpassing pre-pandemic levels. The shopper splurged on luxury products with savings they accumulated during lockdowns. National parks are so crowded, Congress is getting involved. The post-pandemic boom in tourism has left lawmakers wondering how to preserve nature and visitor experience as traffic and crowds increase. In June, over 31 million people visited a National Park Service site. Reservations, staffing, and car limits were pitched as solutions during testimony in a Senate subcommittee hearing. Broadway is set to come back in September, but New York is grappling with a series of troubling COVID upswings in all 5 boroughs. Uncertainty about the Delta variant may keep people out of crowded theaters, mask mandates or no. Visit BloombergPursuits.com for more. I'm Andrew O'Day, Bloomberg Radio.
145 over 92.
180 over 111.
182 over 100. And I had a heart attack and a cardiac arrest. And then a stroke.
Your blood pressure numbers could change your life.
A lot of people don't understand, including myself. I didn't, now I do, the impact of having a stroke.
My memory is shot.
When I woke up, I couldn't speak.
Lowering your high blood pressure could save you from a heart attack or stroke. If you've stopped your treatment plan, restart it or talk to your doctor about creating one that works better for you. Start taking the right steps at manageyourbp.org.
It's not a life, but I'm going to make it better. Coming back. Ask your doctor, check your blood pressure.
Brought to you by the American Heart Association, American Medical Association, and the Ad Council.
If you're having a business dispute, the process can be slow and drawn out, especially if you rely on litigation in the courts. You can wait for years before your case is resolved, and the longer your case proceeds, the more your case can cost. Not with the American Arbitration Association. Arbitration or mediation with the American Arbitration Association is faster. In fact, nearly 50% of our cases settle prior to hearings. ADR.org. Resolve faster.
Connecting decision makers to a network of news and financial information 24 hours a day. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
The Delta variant of the coronavirus makes up 93% of infections in the U.S. Morgan Chesky reports from Louisiana.
Doctors are particularly concerned with a new kind of patient, a younger patient that could be uniquely vulnerable to this virus. We're here outside the Children's Hospital in New Orleans, where doctors are seeing patients as young as several weeks old to teenagers.
The Delta strain accounts for 98% of the infections when looking at the region where states like Iowa and Kansas are located. It looks like fewer people think President Biden is doing a good job in handling the pandemic. A survey from Quinnipiac University puts that number at 53%. That's a 12-point drop from May. Comes amid a surge in cases due to the Delta variant. And 20 survivors of a crash in Texas are fighting to stay alive. They were seriously hurt yesterday when their van slammed into a utility pole in Encino near a border checkpoint. Police say it was overloaded with migrants. The driver and 9 passengers died. I'm Michael Kastner.
Economics, healthcare, policy. We could tell you more about the experts who join us on Bloomberg Surveillance.
Do we have a Washington consensus?
There's been isolationism.
But wouldn't you rather hear them for yourself? Weekday mornings at 7 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow, and U.S. stock index futures are rising this morning. Let's go to the first word breaking news desk. For today's morning call, here's Bill Maloney. Bill, good morning.
And good morning, Karen. That's right. U.S. futures are posting modest gains right now. Dow futures up 54 points. S&P's gain 10. NASDAQ futures rise by 34. The U.S. 10-year yield at 1.18%. Gold is little change. Bitcoin is down 4.5%. And Japan rose 0.5% overnight, while European markets are trading mixed this morning. Back in the U.S. on the economic front at 8:30, initial jobless claims. After the bell last night, Uber racked up a wider-than-expected loss, and EA beat and raised guidance. Regarding some of the earnings this morning, Moderna's Q2 COVID-19 vaccine revenue was $4.2 billion. Estimate there, $4.09 billion. In other news, CoinDesk reported JP Morgan is pitching a Bitcoin fund to wealthy clients. Goldman Sachs lifted its outlook for the S&P, and Robinhood holders just filed to sell up to 98 million shares. The stock is down 11% pre-market. Wrapping things up, Elf Beauty raised to buy at Citigroup, Etsy raised to equal weight over at Morgan Stanley, and GoDaddy was cut to neutral over at Piper. Live from the first breaking news desk, I'm Bill Maloney. Karen?
All right, Bill, thank you. To hear live breaking news over your Bloomberg, type squawk on your terminal, SQUAWK. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Karen, thank you very much. A fast-moving wildfire has engulfed a Northern California town, leveling much of the downtown area and several homes. The Dixie Fire tore through Greenville last evening, destroying businesses and homes. The Biden administration is taking the first steps toward requiring nearly all foreign visitors to the U.S. to be vaccinated for the coronavirus. At the Tokyo Olympics, the U.S. women's soccer team won the bronze medal with a 4-3 win over Australia. The U.S. basketball team rallied to play in the gold medal game. The U.S. beat Australia. The U.S. still leads the medal count with 86, including 27 gold. Major League Baseball, the Yankees beat the Orioles 10-3. The Mets won. Red Sox snapped a 5-game skid, beating the Tigers 4-1. Also winners, the A's and Giants. The Nationals lost. Global news, 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg.
The following commentary is from Bloomberg Opinion.
Party policing. I'm Jonathan Bernstein, a columnist for Bloomberg Opinion. This week brought some reminders that neither party has a monopoly on politicians they should want nothing to do with, and that, right now, Democrats are far more capable than Republicans of taking action. First, Democrats have been just about unanimous, from Joe Biden on down, that Governor Andrew Cuomo needs to resign. And then there was a House special election in Ohio, in which the bulk of the party came together to defeat Nina Turner, a prominent Bernie Sanders supporter. The party's problem with Turner wasn't that she was ideologically extreme. It was that she had never shown any sign of party loyalty, but had demonstrated some signs of demagoguery, which she promptly reinforced in a speech after the results were clear, in which she blamed evil money. Again, both parties can attract bad politicians. But Republicans, if anything, encourage demagogues and irresponsible leaders, which is why they currently have at least a few dozen of them in Congress, while the Democrats have at most a handful. I'm Jonathan Bernstein. For more opinion, please go to Bloomberg.com/opinion or OPIN Go on the Bloomberg terminal.
This has been Bloomberg Opinion.
And you can hear Bloomberg Opinion commentaries every weekday at this time. Terminal customers can read more at OPIN Go. We're live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, where it's coming up to 6:51 on Wall Street, and it's time to check what's going on in D.C., where some of the top stories include the White House urging states to expedite rental aid, even as the extension on moratoriums is now challenged in court. Senators looking to allow states to use COVID funds to pay for infrastructure. And President Biden setting a goal for clean cars to be half of U.S. sales by the end of the decade. For more on all this, we're joined by Bloomberg government reporter Emily Wilkins. Emily, let's start with the latest on the eviction moratorium. It's back in place now, but there's still the challenge of getting the money through the pipeline.
Right. And Nathan, this is something that gets pretty complicated pretty quickly, because you immediately have 50 different things that are going on in the 50 different states. We have seen some states be able to set up the programs and the processes in place to make sure that that federal money is getting to those who need it. But we've seen other states really struggle with this, including states like New York, which hasn't distributed any of the funding that was supposed to be going to renters struggling to pay their rent. And so this is something that now your federal government, you're hearing it from President Joe Biden, you're hearing it from Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, really coming out and urging states to make sure that they're getting this money out there, even though they've got 2.5 months now before this eviction moratorium expires. As you point out, there are legal challenges now, and if the court decides to strike down this eviction moratorium before then, it could mean that they only have not very much time at all to really go forward and get this funding distributed.
Yeah, you mentioned those legal challenges. I guess we shouldn't be surprised that they've already been filed. What more can you tell us about that?
So remember last time that we did actually have a legal challenge go all the way to the Supreme Court, where Brett Kavanaugh actually joined Democrats and one other Republican justice in upholding the eviction moratorium. And in that, Kavanaugh said that he felt they could go till July 31st, which is when the last one expired. But then after that, they would need the power of Congress. The argument that the White House is now going to make is we have narrowed this eviction moratorium. It's not for everyone. It's only for those who live in these areas where cases are rising. That said, that covers a large chunk of the country. But the idea is that it's a different program and that it might stand up to more legal scrutiny.
All right, let's turn to the latest on infrastructure now, and a pretty interesting effort to when it comes to how to pay for it, having states use COVID relief.
Yeah, this is something that Republicans have talked about for a while, but now they're starting to get some Democrats on board. Under this proposal from Alex Padilla, a Democrat of California, and John Cornyn, a Republican from Texas, they would allow states to access up to 25% of funding that they have gotten for COVID-19 and use it toward infrastructure. This is coming as senators are still struggling to figure out how to pay for the infrastructure bill. I feel like a robot, Nathan. I've repeated this so much. But the one provision that they were looking at was to do some regulatory actions within the cryptocurrency market. That provision is now being a little bit more narrowed. It might not raise as much revenue. And so the thought is if they can open up space to spend on infrastructure, that might allow them to have the bill fully paid for.
All right, let's turn to what's happening at the White House later today. We're expecting an announcement from President Biden when it comes to clean cars, but we've already gotten a fact sheet from the White House, and it sounds like he's going to be announcing a pretty ambitious goal when it comes to the amount of clean energy electric vehicles that he wants sold this decade.
Yeah, he plans to call for half of all vehicles sold in the U.S. to be capable of emission-free driving, and that's once again by the end of the decade. Automakers say the goal is a pretty ambitious one, and it can only be achieved with bigger government investment in charging stations and other infrastructure. But this really comes as both the infrastructure bill and the reconciliation bill has a large push on climate change from Democratic lawmakers, making sure that both of these bills have provisions that address environment, that address pollution, that address electric vehicles. And so this is sort of kind of coming concurrently together as this bill works through Congress and down the road at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
Down the road. I see what you did there. Bloomberg government reporter Emily Wilkins, thank you for this, as always. And you can read more about these stories at Bloomberg.com or on the Bloomberg terminal, and follow all the latest on Bloomberg Radio in Washington. Bloomberg 99.1 and 105.7 FM HD2. Karen.
Nathan, it is 6:55 on Wall Street. It's time for the Bloomberg NJIT STEM Report. It's brought to you by New Jersey Institute of Technology. NJIT makes research breakthroughs and is ranked one of the nation's most research-intensive universities by Carnegie Classification. More at njit.edu/R1. Now here's what's making news in science, technology, engineering, and math. The World Health Organization is calling for a moratorium on coronavirus booster shots until the end of next month. That way, all countries could focus on vaccinating at least 10% of their populations. The agency appealed to the wealthiest nations to address the disparities in vaccination rates around the world. President Biden plans to call for half of all vehicles sold in the U.S. to be emission-free by the end of the decade. The president will be joined at the White House later today by representatives of the major Detroit automakers and the United Automobile Workers Union. Senior administration officials say President Biden will unveil an executive order establishing that the goal for half of all the cars sold to be battery electric, plug-in hybrid electric, or fuel cell electric by 2030. And Target has come up with a new way to lure future employees: free college. The retailer is pledging $200 million over 4 years to fund educational courses for its U.S. employees. Workers can choose from 250 classes at more than 40 schools on topics ranging from computer science to design. They will accrue no out-of-pocket costs, even for textbooks and other fees. And that's the Bloomberg NJIT STEM Report. Futures this morning are on the rise. S&P futures up 8 points, Dow futures up 38, NASDAQ futures up 32. 10-year Treasury up 2/30 seconds, yield 1.17%. The yield on the 2-year 0.18%. NYMEX crude oil little changed at $68.18 a barrel, and COMEX gold also little changed, up $1.30 at $18.15.80 an ounce. And Bloomberg surveillance is straight ahead with Tom Keene, Jonathan Farrow, and Lisa Abramowitz. For Nathan Hager, I'm Karen Moscow, and this is Bloomberg.
Influential conversation.
4 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Over
over the next 10 years, we will have a recession. And when that happens, earnings often drop 30%.
I think the market can still move higher. It's just going to happen more on the cyclical side.
A pullback in yields could cause some of that volatility.
The Fed have not spoken about this, but they will not be happy to see the 10-year approaching 1%.
Our base case is that they tee up tapering perhaps as early as the November meeting.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene, Jonathan Farrow, and Lisa Abramowitz.
It is Payrolls Eve from New York City for our audience worldwide. Good morning, good morning. This is Bloomberg Surveillance Live on TV and radio alongside Tom Keene and Lisa Abramowitz. I'm Jonathan Farrow. Your equity market futures positive, 0.2%, up 9. The big bull on the street right now, Tom Keene, is David Kostin of Goldman Sachs.
Well, there's a readjustment. He's got some company out there at 4,700, but what's really important, John, is he migrates out strongly into next year with a real statement on end of 2022.
4,700 this year. 4,900 next year, 7% upside into year-end, 11% upside into 22 year-end. And Tom Keene, a market that apparently will have stable interest rates. Your thoughts on that?
Well, the stable interest rates are there. He's talking about that. He's talking about earnings growth, and I'm going to bring it over to someone way out front on double-digit optimism, and that's Ben Laidler. And the common theme of Laidler, Kostin, and the other bulls is, yeah, interest rates matter. Yes, the Fed matters. Yes, the jobs report matters. John, what really matters is what are corporations doing?
What are corporations doing right now, Tom? They're making money, and margins are looking good. And Lisa, the big story, I think, for the next 12 months is can they continue to keep those margins insulated?
And actually, I was speaking with Gina Martin-Adams. We all were yesterday of Bloomberg Intelligence, and she was saying that people have actually underestimated how much margin pressures have come in with S&P 500 company earnings in the second quarter, that basically those margin pressures are increasing more than she had previously expected. The other question I have is, how much does this corporate strength reflect economic strength, and how much are these unique stories, John?
Would you like to get to the Bank of England rate decision? Would you like to run through that?
I think it's thrilling.
I know you've been excited. Interest rates unchanged, Tom, at 10 basis points. The asset purchase program, both the corporate and the gilt purchase program, those targets, they are unchanged too. The vote was split, though, 7-1. Some people were looking for 6-2. Dave Ramsden, Michael Saunders, they were looking for dissent there. They got just one dissent from Michael Saunders on that asset purchase target. 7-1 to keep bond buying target unchanged. So just a little bit of dissent starting to come through a bit more formally over on Threadneedle Street, Tom.
Does the Bank of England governor have the same power as Chairman Powell?
With regards to what, Tom?
Life in general. I mean, do they have the same oomph?
They have the same approach, apparently, because the Bank of England sees inflation of 4% in 4Q, and it will fall back close to target from there. That sounds like the T word to me, Tom, over at the Bank of England. So they share the same language.
They can
Can we agree on that?
Yeah.
Cable 139.12, basically unchanged off the back of this. We're still positive by 0.2%. Euro dollar a snooze fest too. I can run through the price action for you now after we got through the Bank of England. I just knew you were so excited about that, Tom. Euro dollar 118.44, positive 0.06% into the bond market. Not much change here either. 117.86 on 10s. And in the equity market, Lisa, we keep grinding, don't we? We keep grinding higher, up 8. We advance 0.2%.
And I will say, as we grind higher, what is the incentive to sell equities if you have the likes of David Kostin over at Goldman Sachs saying it's only going to go higher over time, even if there is some volatility in the meantime? And perhaps that's keeping price action elevated at where it is for the time being. What we're looking at economically in about 90 minutes time, 8:30 a.m., U.S. initial jobless claims. The expectation is for a decline to 383,000. This, to me, is a question. A lot of people dismiss this figure as being noisy, irrelevant over the past few months after the pandemic and some of the assistance programs. Do people start to attach more weight to this stubbornly high pace of jobless filings over the past few weeks, despite the fact that there is such a robust labor market? Then at 10 a.m., Fed Governor Christopher Waller is giving a speech on central bank digital currencies. A lot of people are curious about whether there could be a Fed coin. But Chris Waller has also been a little bit more hawkish, talking about how if there is a pretty hot labor market over the next 2 months, that he would be okay with indicating as soon as September some sort of announcement about tapering bond purchases. I'm curious if he talks any more about what the parameters are for that. At 3 p.m., President Biden is planning to call for half of the vehicles sold in the United States to be emission-free by the end of the decade. How much will this require policy initiatives on the part of the White House? How much will some of the big auto manufacturers in the United States back this? And any guidance as to money that's going to some of these electric charging stations and other initiatives will be interesting to the market, John.
Elisa, thank you. What to look out for? Tom?
John, I'm upset. What is the Fed coin based on?
No idea.
Are you kidding me?
Are you that upset about it?
Yeah, I think this is nuts.
No, I think that there is this idea of why should there be a bank as the intermediary between the U.S. government and individuals? If people basically are using digital money anyway, by nature of paying things on Venmo, why not have a sort of central depository? And this, I think, has been a very controversial issue for financial institutions.
Are you two in an argument right now? I can't tell.
John, it's a marriage, John. What can I say? Okay. You can't tell.
Cable 139.42. We're approaching 140 on the pound against the US dollar. Very close.
Lisa, just say Hermes and it'll work out.
I'll just keep talking to myself.
Thank you.
The Bank of England sees a modest tightening over the forecast period as likely necessary. You'll hear from Governor Bailey at the top of the hour in about 55 minutes time or so, so look out for that. I'm going to bring in Gene Tenuso. Gene, it's just you and I now, the Columbia Threadneedle Investments Global Head of Fixed Income. Gene, let's work through this bond market. Real yields were negative through 120 yesterday. Can you get your head around that, Gene?
Well, look, it's where the Fed has placed interest rates at this point in time. And what we've seen in the last month is that data have started to disappoint relative to expectations in the first time really since May of last year. Data are still good. The economy is still growing. We saw second quarter GDP with personal consumption at almost a 12% annualized rate. But now expectations have become high enough that it's hard for the real data to exceed those expectations. And you layer on the additional uncertainty around the Delta variant and the potential that we could have additional restrictions. It's not changing the growth story. It's just delaying our return to normal, so to speak, by, we think, a month or two.
Okay, delaying by a month or two, then why do you think that 10-year yields could retest a 1% threshold?
Well, it's a very important juncture right now. We have a lot of workplaces planning to return to the office after Labor Day. We have a lot of schools planning to return to in-person learning. And if those plans are disrupted, particularly students in school, that means parents have to stay home in a two-income household. That delays the return to the labor force for a lot of the population. So I think these are things that can give the Fed pause, and the Fed believes they have flexibility. They do not believe, even though they seem dead set on tapering, I don't think they're dead set that it has to be a Jackson Hole or September announcement. I think November could be a very reasonable announcement. And in that intermediate period, we could very easily retrace a little bit lower.
Gene, what's the new 60-40 split? I don't have a clue. None of this is in the textbooks. I used to be easy. 60% in equities, 40% in bonds. The sophisticates went 60-30, 10% in cash. It's out the window. What's the new mix?
Well, I don't think it's cash, Tom, because cash is guaranteeing you one thing, which is a 0% return. I think a balanced portfolio still makes sense, but I think there's a replacement now or a new safe haven for government bonds, because government bonds now are purely a policy instrument. And now we can look at things like high-grade corporate bonds, investment-grade MBS, a high-quality municipal portfolio, and I think that ought to be the core of a fixed income allocation rather than traditional government securities.
Gene, tail risk, let's talk about that just quickly. If a headline crossed the Bloomberg in the next couple of weeks that said something like the return to school and person-to-person learning was delayed somehow for the month of September, what would that mean for this market?
Well, look, I think it does mean we can push below 1% on the 10-year. That does mean we get exceptionally low and even lower real yields, point earlier, John. But I think this harkens back to like a 2012 type scenario where the economy was still improving. The Fed had yet quite to taper or tighten, and real interest rates continue to grind lower. It seems counterintuitive, but it's not that unusual into a recovery as the Fed has yet to catch up to where the economy is.
So, Gene, final question from me. If we do get those supply constraints easing through September, return to school happens, we start to see people turn up for the jobs that are advertised in a bigger way, what would happen to tips? What would happen to real yields if everyone woke up and said, okay, we no longer need that inflation protection, we don't have to pile into tips in the same way? What would happen to real yields?
I think there's a lot of upside to real yields, and that's a painful environment for tips. And I think it's one that confuses investors because they say, look, it's an inflationary environment. We can see the CPI prints. We'd expect that tips as an asset class to do well. The truth is, in that environment, tips would really get run over. And I think it's a risk to, tips, but also other high quality fixed income, which is why I still think it makes sense to have a more moderate duration profile as we head towards the fourth quarter.
Smart, Gene. Always smart. Got to catch up, sir. Gene Tenuto, Columbia Threadneedle Investments Global Head of Fixed Income. Lisa, what to think about as we get deeper into this year, deeper into the back end of this year? If people suddenly wake up and start seeing this data that spells out a stronger message that says, okay, a lot of this is going to fade. We've piled in a massive way into tips, in a monster fashion. That unwind could be brutal.
Which really, I'm wondering, when you talk about real yields turning more positive potentially or turning less negative, what's the read-through effect on stocks? It kind of depends on where that increase in real yields is coming from. Is it the nominal, or is it in the tips market that a lot of people have discounted as perhaps a bit distorted?
Well, let's be clear here. That 4,700 at Goldman, Tom, for this year, the 4,900 at Goldman for next year, a lot of that leans on some stable and low interest rates going forward from here.
Yeah, it does. We've got a chart on that. I think we've constructed this up, folks. And, John, it puts into scale. For those of you on radio, you take a vector of this, John, and you fold in, what we see on earnings and the rest of it. And then you go out to the end of this year, the end of next year. And I'm sorry, John, Costin's call is just pretty linear, more of the same. It's not a jump condition.
As you were, we keep climbing. Coming up at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. In about an hour from now, we'll catch up with Seema Shah, Principal Global Investors Chief Strategist from New York City this morning. Good morning. Higher forecasts keep coming through. We've had it from Oppenheimer, we've had it from Deutsche Bank, we've had it from Goldman Sachs this morning. Equity futures up 7 on the S&P. We advanced by 0.15%. This is Bloomberg.
Now with the latest news from New York City and around the world, here's Michael Barr.
Tom, Lisa, John, 4 district attorneys across New York State are launching criminal investigations into Governor Andrew Cuomo after the state attorney general released a report detailing accusations of sexual harassment. The prosecutors are asking for any additional victims to come forward. Albany District Attorney David Soares is requesting investigative materials from the inquiry.
The first priority for us at the moment is to make sure that the brave souls who did come forward and cooperate are in fact exposed to services that even if they choose not to cooperate in a criminal proceedings would be made available.
Cuomo is facing more pressure to resign as support from his own party disappears. As the Delta variant spreads across the country, outright resentment is growing between those who are vaccinated and those who are not. Rising infection rates, fewer open hospital beds, and new mask mandates are all being blamed on the unvaccinated, who in turn say they won't be bullied. But infectious disease specialist Dr. John Brownstein says patience is the key.
Vaccinated people need to care about the unvaccinated in the population. They're the ones that will continue to allow this virus to persist, infect themselves, but also, unfortunately, infect those that are especially immunocompromised or elderly. And ultimately, they're the ones that can bring this pandemic to an end right now.
Dr. Brownstein says getting vaccinated is the key to ending the pandemic. Landlords filed a legal challenge to President Joe Biden's extension of the coronavirus eviction moratorium until October, saying it goes against a ruling by the U.S. Supreme Court in July. This week, the CDC extended a ban on evictions in areas of the country with substantial and high transmissions of COVID-19. Wind-driven wildfire tore through a Northern California mountain town, leaving much of the downtown in ashes. The Dixie Fire raged through the northern Sierra Nevada town of Greenville last evening. Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studios, this is Global News, 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg.
NJIT. The world's financial decision makers connect on the Bloomberg terminal, the buy side and the sell side, together, collaborating across markets and countries in real time, sharing ideas, negotiating trades, and forming an influential network of over 325,000 financial professionals that helps power global markets. Isn't it time you join them? Request a demo at bloomberg.com/professional.
makes the workforce of the future. And Greg Sauter, a member of NJIT's Board of Overseers and president of engineering firm WGI, says NJIT graduates have the in-demand skills that drive today's tech-powered workplace.
Our world is moving to a place of connecting the physical with the digital. In the field of engineering and infrastructure, there's not a thing that we do that's not being changed by technology. We've gone from two-dimensional renderings to immersive, augmented, and virtual reality. Solution sets used to be solved one at a time. Now we can run nearly an endless alternatives analysis and optimize the output and how we construct that future, from autonomous equipment to 3D and 4D printing. NJIT students graduate with that critical understanding of the cyber-physical world and how we move between them, but with that all-important grounding in applied STEM principles.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Burden LLP Accountants and Advisors presents Tax Chat with Mark Boswick, managing partner and leader of Burden's Family Office Services practice.
Every family office is different and needs an advisor who takes the time to ask the right questions to develop a clear understanding of the goals and needs of the family. When choosing an advisor, it's important to select one that will invest the time to understand the desires of each family member, as well as the dynamics and economic realities facing the family as a whole. Burden does this, which enables us to offer a wide range of services, including daily bill pay, portfolio review, and complex tax planning to help preserve a family's wealth while making their lives easier. If you're a high net worth individual or head of a family office, let Burden help protect you, your family, and your business.
For more Tax Chat from Burden Accountants and Advisors, visit burdenllp.com. That's BERDON LLP.com. Burden Accountants and Advisors. We listen, we solve, we do.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Manas Krani.
Anna Stepchanska, Fidelity International Global Macroeconomist. The hyperbole around inflation coming from China may ease. That's global point one. But global point two, it's about the contagion effect, isn't it? If China slows or goes into a quasi-soft landing, that has a global repercussion. Take me through the two consequences of the second round derivatives of what you've just laid out.
For sure, I think that China growth still matters a lot for global growth. It matters a lot for the region, of course. So we are cautious on the region our exportation, and we are going to watch for spillovers. I think the Asia region generally is not very well positioned in terms of looking ahead, because again, the vaccination rate has been slow, so the countries cannot open up, and that drag from the Delta variant will remain persistent there for a while. So that asynchronous recovery will continue, or asynchronous slowdown looking into the second half will continue. And that's why overall we do think that global growth risks are skewed to the downside, not just from China, but also from the rest of emerging markets.
Hear more conversations like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app. Or check your local cable listings.
If the outlook for inflation and outlook for unemployment I summarized earlier turn out to be the actual outcomes for inflation and unemployment realized over the forecast horizon, then I do believe that these three necessary conditions for raising the target range for the funds rate will have been met by year-end 2022.
Did you get all that? If the outlook is the outcome, then this is what we'll do. That was Vice Chair Clarity yesterday. Pretty straightforward stuff from New York City this morning. Good morning. Alongside Tom Keene and Lisa Abramowitz, I'm Jonathan Ferro. Here's your equity market. We advanced 7 on the S&P, up a little more than 0.1%, off session highs. Yields in now by about a basis point to 117.20. Had a little look at 112 in yesterday's session, then bounced back off the back of a really hot, strong ISM, 117.03. Euro dollar unchanged, Tom. Basically, euro dollar positive 0.09% to 118.48.
And the VIX speaks to a resilient market, 17.76. John and Lisa have got all sorts of things to do in Washington. John said to me, well, take us where you want to, so I am. And with Jeff Fitzpatrick of Bloomberg Government, our international and indeed national audience needs to know a very subtle shift that occurred in Biden politics yesterday. And Jack Fitzpatrick, that is the reaffirmation of the center of the Democratic Party, the important election out in Ohio. The left, the progressives went down in flames, and the center holds. Explain that.
Yes, this was an interesting race in the Cleveland area in which I guess establishment candidate did end up winning. The more progressive aligned member, I'm not sure how much of the race speaks entirely to all national politics and more the personalities involved. A series of statement, a bit of a history that had put people off there. It seems like a bellwether at first for people who want to say.
Jack, you sound like you're speaking to consultants. Look, Jack, it's real simple. This is a story. It's a narrative. I got a narrative in Cleveland, and I had a narrative with the mayor's race in New York as well. The Democratic Center has been the surprise of this mid-year 2021.
For the electoral results we've seen, I think that is safe to say. I would point out that as Democrats have focused on what they want to accomplish early in the Biden administration, the center and the left really seem to be closer together than you would imagine from watching what you've seen on the campaign trail. In the major priorities that Biden has pushed, the stimulus that came out, the infrastructure bill, the next big bill, he has essentially followed Bernie Sanders' lead and then allowed the centrists to pare that down. But for the most part, the Joe Manchins and the Bernie Sanders types have been much more close together than anything you would have imagined if you were watching the New York mayoral race or watching Kansas.
But Jack, has it been effective? I've been reading a lot of analyst notes that put the chance of that $3.5 trillion plan getting passed by Democrats as basically a 50-50 pot shot.
It's hard to say whether it's a 50-50 pot shot because they could pare it down more. That absolutely might happen. But we're still talking about trillions of dollars. We're still talking about a push by Democrats and by the mainstream to increase the corporate tax rate, to increase taxes on the wealthiest earners. I don't know if it's a 50-50 shot, but they absolutely could succeed if they're still willing to make some concessions to the center. Right. And what we've seen so far, again, in a couple major instances with a couple $1 trillion involved, is both wings of the party understanding that they need to be essentially unified. Legislatively, it's been basically a unified party lately.
Meanwhile, we're looking at an economy that still has not reached full capacity and still has a lot of room to go, specifically with the labor market. People looking towards September and kids going back to school as a key moment. What is the Biden administration doing to ensure that kids do go back to school in person, considering the fact that suddenly people are raising that as a question now?
That's been one of the tough points for the Biden administration throughout this. That is not right now seemingly a major focus from the federal government. What we've seen from the Biden administration lately in terms of responding to the Delta variant when it comes to schools, mask requirements, that kind of thing, is a little bit more hands-off than early in the pandemic. The latest news on the potential for vaccinating kids under 12 is probably where the most potential is there, but I don't think we are on the brink of concrete actions by the federal government on schools right now, it seems.
Jack, appreciate your time, sir. As always, Jack Fitzpatrick down in DC, our Bloomberg government reporter. Looking forward to payrolls Friday, just around the corner, about 25 hours away. Here are the estimates. 870,000 is your median estimate. At the top end, 1.2 million. At the low end, 350,000. Just coming down a little bit, Tom. as this week grows on.
agree.
We've ticked down from about 950, 925, all the way into about 870.
Delta variant is what it's got to be. I see it permeating every discussion. Jonathan Englander's note at Standard Charter this morning was just brilliant. You mentioned Kit Jukes all fired up, and many others trying to mix this medical story in with economics, and it's pared back a little bit this week.
Lisa, once again, just a massive range for estimates into Friday.
And yet, analysts trying to show how this actually still is important. Steve Englander of Standard Chartered, I know you picked up on this earlier this morning, John. This idea that if we get the consensus of 875,000 additional jobs, this actually could be a hawkish surprise in a certain way, at least as perceived by markets, because it could mean that the U.S. labor market is on track and that the Fed will be more okay with tapering in the nearer term. I think that's interesting. I mean, again, the reaction function in markets to some of these numbers, John.
Here's the quote from Steve and the team over at Standard Chartered. We think investors underestimate the likely impact of U.S. employment data to be released tomorrow. The consensus is 875 now down to about 870. If hit, could stoke hawkish expectations despite being consensus. So consensus is the surprise potentially tomorrow, according to Standard Chartered.
John Ian Lingen publishes moments ago. He's on often, just wonderful, wonderful morning note, really hyper acute. And he says Delta variant, maybe that overcomes anything about jobs.
You think that is the number one issue right now, Tom? I think a lot of people agree with you.
No, I don't agree. I'm not there. I'm not with Lingen on this. I think there is a real economic
Well, that's setting the stage
going up
for a delay of a return to normal. It's pushing things back.
It makes
maybe a month or so, maybe two.
It makes the x-axis a complete mystery, particularly around school, as Lisa mentions.
There's a bullish take as well, just to be sort of contrarian here. And that is that it's accelerating the move to get vaccinated, that you're seeing more people getting vaccinated in the harder hit areas where less people had gotten vaccinated previously. This is actually potentially going to end things.
We're all just in shock.
On a faster pace.
You know, John, we gotta let the story out. The consultants have come in, and the first thing they said is Lisa's gloom is just
Lisa
too
needs
much.
to be more bullish.
It's the pendulum of consultants that shifted
was Lisa just
the tone
bullish
of this show.
No, I'm trying to look at the derivative effect of Delta.
Oh, really? Chicago liberal arts
Is it something
does
to
math.
fear or a reason to be optimistic because we're correcting course? One or the other. I'm just shocked that you said something optimistic. Thank you. Thank you.
President of the
The world's financial decision makers connect on the Bloomberg Terminal. The buy side and the sell side together, collaborating across markets and countries in real time, sharing ideas, negotiating trades, and forming an influential network of over 325,000 financial professionals that helps power global markets. Isn't it time you join them? Request a demo at bloomberg.com/professional.
Jewish Communal Fund, Zoya Raines and her husband Robert Friedman, Jewish activists and philanthropists, talk about why they chose the Jewish Communal Fund for their charitable giving.
As very busy working parents, we wanted to focus more on the charity part of it and wanted to focus more on our children and less on the administration.
The Jewish Communal Fund is one of the oldest and largest donor-advised funds, but at the same time, they're totally up to date and have state-of-the-art systems for us to access and manage our contributions online. The assets in our fund at the JCF grow tax-free, so we can generate more charitable dollars to support the charities that we care about most.
Let JCF minimize your taxes and maximize your charitable giving.
We're incredibly passionate about our charity, and the JCF allows us to focus more on the charity and less on the administration and the headaches.
For more information about Jewish Communal Fund, visit our website at jcfny.org and request a new fund kit.
I spend a lot of time in the garage, but even more time in the rain, sleet, and mud. In 95, I helped tow your moving trailer. In 05, I helped you get out of a ditch. Yeah, I know I'm a bit rusty, and sadly in 09, it was sparks from me, your handy chains, dragging behind your truck that accidentally started a wildfire.
Sparks from dragging chains can start a wildfire. Spark a change, not a wildfire. Visit SmokeyBear.com. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. More flight cancellations today for Spirit Airlines, going into day 5 of problems. The FlightAware website shows almost 340 Spirit flights called off for today, or about 43% of the schedule. Yesterday, the discount carrier canceled 60% of its flights. Spirit says it's working to fix the problems. It points to operational challenges, including staffing shortages. Honeywell is developing a coating for air filters that kills as much as 97% of the coronavirus. The CEO says the coating would need EPA approval, but may be ready as soon as the end of September. It could be used in current heating and air conditioning systems in schools and commercial buildings without costly upgrades. TikTok owner ByteDance has laid off at least hundreds of employees. Bloomberg has learned that the move follows the shutting down of most of the company's online education businesses to comply with Beijing's new regulatory crackdown on the tutoring industry. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
What's the difference between you and your competition?
What's your vision in this relationship?
We're guessing one thing is that you are better informed.
European Central Bank President Christine Lagarde had this to say.
Actually, we're not guessing.
The realism of this is tangible.
Up to the moment news.
Some of the biggest states could see most of the money.
Expert analysis.
Does that mean you're focusing on banks and other financials?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. There are reporters who live for a great business story.
What actually worries you, though?
It is another fascinating piece of reporting.
They work here.
It is a fantastic story.
Bloomberg Business Week, weekday afternoons at 2 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio.
Live from New York City for our audience worldwide on TV and radio, this is Bloomberg Surveillance, and here is the price action this Thursday morning. Equity futures advanced by about 0.2% on the S&P. On the Nasdaq, on a Russell, we're up about 0.1%. More broadly, here's the story over the last week. A series of upgrades from Oppenheimer, from Deutsche Bank, and this morning from Goldman. Let's work with the Goldman call. Looking for 4,700 year-end, looking for 4,900 next year-end. So 7% upside from where we are yesterday, 11% upside into year-end next year, and on what? Better earnings and low and stable rates. So let's work through it. Get to the bond market, switch up the board. 2s, 10s and 30s look like this. Your 10-year yield, 117.36. Big range intraday yesterday off the back of that really hot ISM. Can we stay low and stable? Most people expect yields to go higher from here still. Year-end forecast, median 180 in our survey.
Is it 180?
It's still 180. From here at 117.36. BYFC on the Bloomberg terminal, Tom.
Thank you.
For your bond yield forecast. No problem. 180 from 117, is that low and stable? Will that even happen? This is the one for me. Switch up the board and get to this. It's a chart of the ISM. The ISM yesterday, the ISM services read, was at a record. At a record. If we can keep this kind of pace up, anywhere near this kind of pace into year-end, Tom, if we get the kind of capitulation maybe, if you get the supply-side response in this economy, when you really think about it, lift the lid on the ISM yesterday. Demand outstripping supply. That was the story, wasn't it? Demand outstripping supply. We have really robust demand in this economy. At some point, for many people, they would argue, at some point, yields have got to go higher. Now, it's not my argument, Tom. We've all heard the same argument a million times and yields have gone lower. But surely, in the minds of many, yields have got to go higher. What does it mean for the Goldman call then?
Yeah, exactly. This is really important, folks. We're going to stop the show here because John has put a sum together, which is the x-axis. Costin has gone, John, more optimistic because he's got a greater belief in the trajectory of the economy out through 2022. And you wonder how that will dovetail down the road when Jan Hatzius sees the microdata to be able to make the call, and will Hatzius extend out his call towards a 3% GDP economy? When will they link up?
Let's be clear here too, Tom. An equity market can perform tremendously well in a rising rate environment. In a rising Fed fund rate environment. We saw that in the previous cycle, 2 cycles ago. We saw that in 2013 too, in a big way. But I do just wonder, Tom, if you've got a call out there at the moment on this equity market performing really well on low and stable rates, I do wonder at some point we should have some capitulation, shouldn't we, at some point? I just wonder how that reshapes those forecasts going forward from here.
And that's the mix, as Tobias Lefkovich told us yesterday.
Yeah, Tobias down at 4,000 on the S&P. A debate that we can continue having.
We can.
Citigroup underweight, or rather cutting their weighting on US equities too in the last 24 hours. That's the debate, and right now that debate is really finely balanced as we try and work out where we go next. That's the cross-asset story. Let's get you some movers too. Morning, Romain.
Hey, good morning, John. When we talk about the movers here, a lot of individual stories. Biggest volume mover out there once again today is Robinhood. Of course, you saw that 50% pop yesterday. In fact, almost an 80% pop on an intraday basis. A lot of that had to do with the fact that options actually finally started to trade. Those shares, though, down about 10% here in the pre-market as a lot of those SEC filings start to pile up, as those insiders start to cash in a little bit on this. So a little bit of a back and forth, a little bit of a seesaw on what is now, of course, one of the most popular stocks out there. Also popular this morning is Ford. That's actually your second biggest volume mover. Of course, Joe Biden, the president of the United States, expected to have an event later today in Detroit announcing an ambitious plan to make half of all of the cars made here in the U.S. emissions free by the end of the decade. Seeing a little bit of a bump today in Ford as well as GM. Both of those companies will be at the event, as well as the executives over at Chrysler. Interestingly enough, Elon Musk tweeting that he and Tesla were not actually invited to this event, Tom.
You're covering us a lot better than we are at 4 p.m. in the afternoon on the close. Let's have some obligatory CFA level 2 talk, Romain. Does the fundamental analysis really work, like indirect and direct cash flow, or are Ford and GM completely overwhelmed by the chip thing?
Well, right now, they're completely overwhelmed by it. I mean, you saw that in the monthly data that came out yesterday by Ford, a 37% drop. You saw that in GM's earnings, which were also out yesterday, which showed a lot of pressure here on this with regards to their supply chain and getting the components they need. They can't keep up with demand, and as a result, that has actually seen demand fall. So it'll be interesting to see what the short-term effects of all this are. But there is a longer-term story here about these companies making cars, I guess, for a new generation of people who at least want the option to have something that's electric or hybrid or something else. Flip up the board real quickly here. Later tonight, we are going to get a bunch of travel stocks reporting, including TripAdvisor and Expedia. Booking came out last night. They really knocked it out of the park. Those results coming in, the gross bookings at least coming in at about $22 billion, well above what the street was looking for at $16 billion. The CEO, Tom and John of Booking, Glenn Fogel, he'll be on with us in the 4 o'clock hour.
Romain, thank you so much. The economic flow right now, folks, is extraordinary. As we spoke to David Blanchflower of Dartmouth moments ago, we are thrilled to bring you the former governor of the Federal Reserve System, Randall Krasner of the University of Chicago Booth School, holding court in London as well. Randy, we are staggering step by step through the tangible data through a new Fed policy. Dovetail the mystery around the table at the Eccles building. They have a new Fed theory, a new Fed construction, but we've got the same old data. How do they fit?
Yeah, same old data, but a new framework. That's exactly right. So we have this average inflation targeting framework that says, rather than, well, when we see inflation coming, we're going to act now proactively. It says, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to wait until inflation gets to at least to our target or maybe even above before we start to act. And obviously we've seen that because inflation has been very high over the last few months, but the Fed has said, hey, we're not moving until 2022, 2023.
Randy, are there any hawks left at the Federal Reserve?
Oh, yes. I think you see some of them.
Who are they? Because it sounds like to me there are doves and then there are super doves. Doves and super doves. And I see no hawks right now. Who are they?
Well, I guess that also changes in context, too. So you have someone like Governor Waller, who just spoke recently, who said, we got to get moving. We got to start tapering a little bit more rapidly because we see the economy coming back. Rich Clarida had a fairly optimistic view of where the economy was going, seemed to be discounting the role of the Delta variant, although he is certainly much more on the dovish side of waiting until end of 2022 before starting to raise rates.
Do you agree with Eddie Blanchflower, who was on the show earlier today, who is basically saying it's correct for all of these doves to be dove and dovish because basically the fact that we have this very low participation rate in the U.S. labor market is really a result of failed policy? Do you agree with that assessment?
I'm not so sure it's exactly a result of failed policy. I mean, I think there are a lot of people who've decided that especially the older people who had come back into the labor market who said, gosh, with all these uncertainties around health, maybe this is a good time for me to stay out of the labor market to retire. So I'm not quite sure that it's just policy. I think there are a lot of other things like the pandemic that is just a shock that we really can't do. I mean, we can respond with vaccines and such,
right,
but it just fundamentally changes the way people think about going to work, going shopping.
Professor Krosner, you represent the land of microeconomics. Macro is just more microeconomics at Chicago. Professor Krosner, how do you address the dynamics forward of our immense demand and supply imbalance?
So this is a really interesting question where policy has a very large role to play. Obviously, we've seen extraordinarily easy monetary policy and a commitment for that for a long time. Unbelievable fiscal policy, just unprecedented. You've heard that term a billion times, but it really is true. We're either have spent or planning to spend on the order of 50% of GDP within an 18-month time period. That's just absolutely extraordinary. Plus, you had all the pent-up demand, the high savings that people had built up when they could go out. So that's all being unleashed. And so obviously we're seeing that in terms of lots of price pressure, combined with some one-off factors like the chip shortage that you were talking about, like other supply chain disruptions. So we're going to see a lot of price increases in the short run. The key question is, are those transitory or are those sustained? I think we're going to see them transitory for a while. I don't think they're necessarily going to be sustained over the year to 2 year horizon, but over 6 months horizon, I think certainly.
Randy, I don't want to talk about projections. I want to talk about how we'd respond to outcomes. So help me understand this from a Federal Reserve perspective. If a high rate of inflation persists, and it's primarily attributed to supply-side constraints, but those supply-side constraints also persist, how long before you have to take notice of that?
Yeah, that's a very important issue, because now it's sort of described as one-offs. There's some supply chain disruptions, but within 6 months to a year, they'll be eased. High demand for used cars. There are a lot of particular explanations each month. But if those accumulate over time, and in particular, if those start to change people's expectations, so that people are expecting that, well, gee, I need to get paid more in order to consume, and companies say, well, I can push price increases in a way that I haven't been able to do in a decade or two to accommodate those higher wage increases. You can get into this cycle where inflation starts to take off and become more permanent. That's really the key. Can they keep inflation expectations well anchored? We'll see.
Randy, got to leave it there. Randy Krosner, University of Chicago Booth School economics professor and former Fed governor. That's got to be the number one issue right now, Tom. The supply-side constraints, if they don't ease going through the back end of this year, what does it mean for this Federal Reserve?
Well, there's just two different dynamics. And again, there's the macro view of the supply side, John, of the United States of America. But there's all the different subsectors. My optimism, a la David Kostin, is corporations, the large publicly traded ones, mid-sized small business, on a microcosm basis, John, they will adjust sector to sector as they see fit.
And they are adjusting, and so far there is some real price tolerance in this economy. Lisa, to borrow some of the language from Chairman Powell, do these one-off increases, so-called one-off increases, start to shape the inflation process? Are we going to start to see that near a year end?
And has this process get worked out with the fact that a lot of people have not gotten those wage increases yet? Do we start talking more about the S word, stagflation?
Stag-light, I thought that's what we're going with.
It's the Lisa we know and love.
Weren't we calling it stag-light, stagflation night?
Dr. Phil's
something like that. Lisa's back. Steve will be joining us. Steve Rasciuto, Mr. World Securities Chief, US economist. Yields in a basis point to 117.36 on 10s. Equities firmer, up 0.2% on the S&P. From New York, this is Bloomberg.
Now with the latest news from New York City and around the world, here's Michael Barr.
A majority of New York State Assembly members support beginning impeachment proceedings against Governor Andrew Cuomo if he does not resign over investigative findings that he allegedly sexually harassed at least 11 women. That's according to an Associated Press count. At least 86 of the body's 150 members have said publicly or told the AP that they favored initiating the process of ousting the governor if he does not quit. Democratic New York State Senator Todd Kaminsky is a former prosecutor.
There's no doubt that they are going to act to impeach, and impeaching would, by law, trigger his immediate temporary removal until such time as the trial has concluded. Every assembly member I've talked to of all different stripes geographically, party-wise, have all said that impeachment is the only path that they are prepared to take. So I expect that to happen swiftly.
Senator Kaminsky spoke with Emily Wilkins on Bloomberg's Sound On. One of the governors that President Joe Biden pointed out as standing in the way for fighting the pandemic is firing back. Bloomberg's Ed Baxter has more on Ron DeSantis of Florida.
DeSantis says the federal government is not going to tell his state citizens what to do.
If you're coming after the rights of parents in Florida, I'm standing in your way. I'm not going to let you get away with it.
DeSantis has issued an executive order banning school districts and localities from mask mandates. In Florida, hospitalizations are up again day to day, surpassing the peak from the previous summer wave, and hospital administrators are complaining they can't get oxygen, in part because DeSantis won't extend the state of emergency deliveries. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Radio.
Israel has escalated its response to rockets fired from Lebanon by launching airstrikes. The army said today that jets struck the launch sites from which rockets have been fired over the previous day. Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studios, this is Global News, 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. With the Bloomberg Business of...
The world's financial decision makers connect on the Bloomberg terminal. The buy side and the sell side together, collaborating across markets and countries in real time, sharing ideas, negotiating trades, and forming an influential network of over 325,000 financial professionals that helps power global markets. Isn't it time you join them? Request a demo at bloomberg.com/professional.
Sports Report, I'm Michael Barr. The Atlanta Braves are being sued. A San Antonio policeman says the Major League Baseball team stole his design he sent 2 decades ago to the team of a tomahawk that forms the crossbar of the team's stylized letter A. Jose Antonio Rodriguez alleges he sent his design to the Braves in 2002, asking them to evaluate and possibly use the design. According to the complaint, Rodriguez alleges the Braves returned his submission, saying they were not interested in the artwork. In 2002 or 2003, however, Rodriguez says the Braves copied his work and began using it as a new logo. NASCAR says as COVID-19 cases increase across the country, all personnel must wear a face mask in enclosed areas at all times, regardless of vaccination status. That includes haulers and buildings, restrooms, race control, and suites. NASCAR says masks will not be required outdoors. That's a Bloomberg Business of Sports Report. I'm Michael Barr.
How are financial services firms managing in this new reality? Claire Santaniello, Managing Director at BNY Mellon's Pershing, explains.
If the current times have taught us anything, it's the critical role that technology plays in client relationships. Global conditions have created a business imperative for firms to digitally transform the way they meet client needs and the way they work. Pershing's industry-leading technology enables you to adapt to the evolving ways your clients want to do business, now and in the future, and can help you build an even stronger digital client experience in a simpler, smarter, and safer environment. We have worked with clients of every size to transform their business. Pershing gives you the foundation to stand on, plus our unique perspective, to help you run your business even during the most uncertain of times. We help you consider everything.
To learn more about how Pershing can help you transform your business, visit Pershing.com. Pershing LLC, member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Business, finance, and the latest news affecting world markets. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
Get vaccinated against coronavirus before visiting the U.S. That'll eventually be the new message for other countries. The White House reportedly asked groups within the government to come up with a phased reopening plan as most international travel is on hold. New York State Assembly members appear to be moving in the direction of impeaching New York Governor Andrew Cuomo. Head of the New York Democratic Party, Jay Jacobs, is among the latest to call for Cuomo to resign.
Politically, there is virtually no support left in the state for him.
Assembly Speaker Carl Casey says that Cuomo can no longer remain in office following the state attorney general report accusing the governor of sexual harassment. Meanwhile, numerous district attorneys are opening criminal investigations into Cuomo. The co-founder of Microsoft is opening up about his divorce just days after it became final. Bill Gates calls it a very sad milestone. He told CNN his ex-wife Melinda is a great person and confirmed they still talk when it comes to running their global foundation. Wall Street futures are higher this morning. I'm Michael Kastner.
We're such an easy-to-access source for financial news.
Does that not seem insane?
You may want to pile up some papers and tell people you read them.
What did the company say about new programming?
Bloomberg Markets, weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio.
My concern is that over and over, he has weakened the regulation here. He has led the Fed to ease up there. He's led the Fed to help protect the biggest financial institutions. And there have been dissents against that. I'm very concerned about that.
Senator Warren, with not exactly a ringing endorsement of Chairman Powell,
Yeah, she nailed
on
that.
Bloomberg TV and radio. From New York City this morning, good morning, with Tom Keene, Lisa Bravitz and Jonathan Ferro. This is Bloomberg Surveillance, and here's the price action. We're up 10 on the S&P. We advanced 0.2%. Amidst the Costin over at Goldman, raising his price target to 4,700 year-end. Now looking for 4,700 year-end and 4,900 going into next year, year-end 2022. Into the bond market, yields are lower. 116 again on 10s, 116.86. Euro firmer, euro stronger, euro dollar 118.51. We advance on that currency pair by 0.12%, Tom. 118.51.
Interesting to see, John, what happens with claims here in 40-some minutes. To me, we've undersold it today. It'll be interesting.
We're looking for 383. That's your estimate, Tom. Previous week, 400K.
Interesting to see. We're going to do two things here. We're going to get to Bitcoin here with Michael McGlone, really front and center with the worries about regulation. But first, David Wilson, looking at where I can capture a dividend. David, utilities and real estate. Discuss.
Relative to its real estate counterpart. I mean, it peaked the ratio between the two in October. It's come down 25% through last month, and it's hovering near the low as we speak. And Krinsky's basically figuring it's time for a reversal. You know, in his view, I mean, the utility stocks look like they're, quote, ready for a breakout. And on the other hand, the real estate stocks, quote, are looking tired. I mean, that's what it comes down to. What's interesting with utilities, though, I mean, if you look back over the past few months, I mean, they were even falling when interest rates were falling, which doesn't necessarily make a whole lot of sense because they're the kind of shares that people tend to buy when, you know, they can't get all that much out of bonds.
For those of you on radio, just plain and simple, utilities are not what we looked at years and years and even decades ago. David Wilson, thank you so much. Too short this morning. Right now, we parachuted Michael McGlone, truly expert on Bitcoin, including his latest junket down to Florida to see the Marlins. I think it was the Miami Marlins. You took in 3 games here. And this is a Bitcoin, and I'm sort of surprised at 38,000 Bitcoin given the regulation ferment that's out there. Are you surprised at Bitcoin's resiliency as maybe we get to Gensler coin?
Well, Bitcoin is a discounted bull market is the way I look at it. It's probably put in a good base around that 30,000 level. It's got a good resistance around 40,000, but the new regulation time is very profound because the U.S. is basically embracing it with regulation. China's pushing back. I mean, banned it. To me, that's the new Cold War that's developing, and it's actually very good for Bitcoin. It's one thing that Gensler pointed out is Bitcoin's really not a security, so the U.S. is not going to do much to it. It's all the other issues, and the key things that are securities are digital dollars. So that's the key thing to remember is the most widely traded cryptos on the planet are digital versions of the dollar.
If Bitcoin is not a currency, I think we can agree it's not gold, and Gensler's saying it's not a security, then what is it?
It's like the best thing in the world for traders. Traders love it because it's not artificially stimulated, but the key thing is, I think the thing to remember is it's becoming the digital reserve asset in a world that's going digital. It's major competition for gold, and even as Ray Dalio said this morning, it's a good portfolio diversifier. It fits very well in a bond portfolio, maybe just 5%.
Mike, how is it diversifying at a time when there's a slight risk-off tone with the Delta variant moving around? Is it acting like gold? Is it acting in showing a lack of correlation with risk assets.
Yeah, well, it is going to, if we get a 10% correction in the stock market, God help us, maybe someday that happens again. Bitcoin will probably go down initially, but like gold, look what bond yields are doing. Bond yields are already telling us that Bitcoin and gold have good value. They're stores of value. So I think what's going to happen here is Bitcoin, gold, and long bonds will be some of the best performers in 2H. Most notably, if the stock market just wobbles a little bit. And Bitcoin's already had its correction. Stock market hasn't. Crude oil is way too expensive, and the bond market's had its correction. Now it's going back to trend. Yields are heading lower.
Mike, one of the reasons why I love speaking with you is you can do new school and you can do old school. And when I look at old school, I'm looking at oil in particular. And the risk-off tone that we've seen in credit spreads, that we've seen in equities under the surface with the Russell 2000 has been seen also in the oil markets. Can you get a sense, based on positioning, based on fundamentals, of how much further this potential retracement has to go there?
WTI, $50 a barrel. It's not very profound. Number one, it's the 100-week moving average. Number two, it's the average price for basically the last 5 years. And guess what? The average cost of U.S. sales is around $35 a barrel.
Hold on a second. You're saying that it's going to go from 68 to 50, that's likely?
Yeah, that's, to me, is just that's where it belongs. To me, I mean, it's way too expensive above 75. And guess what? WTI, crude oil, has been enduring a bear market, and it's had a bounce in that bear market. So it's still at a premium in a bear market, the way I see it.
Right now, crude 68, Brent is 70. Good to catch up, Mike. Mike McGlone there, Bloomberg Intelligence commodity strategist. Lisa, surprised by that call, a move to the downside.
Well, I just think about how the fact that energy companies have outperformed pretty significantly. People have been piling into those shares as a possible bet as their recovery train has been expected to gain steam. And we've heard from Bank of America about how they could see $100 a barrel to suddenly go back to $50 would be a pretty disruptive call.
What happened to that super cycle?
Right.
And all of those calls. You're right to point out some of the tension beneath the surface at the moment. Not a big crack in high yield this week, but something to keep an eye on. The underperformance of small caps is something we've been talking about for a number of months, but you saw that pretty profoundly in yesterday's session.
Yeah, I think it's notable just because typically people do look to the high-yield bond market for some sort of canary, some sort of forward look on risk assets. And what you've seen is a pretty steady widening in credit spreads to the widest since we've seen since May. Nothing catastrophic, still very tight. However, people are asking to be compensated more for the risk of default. This is new, John.
The Fed gave the canary a gas mask
over
the last year, Tom. I'm not sure what kind of a read you can get from high yield in the same way you used to be able to.
I strongly support that. One of my themes this morning was the canary in Zurich, Swiss 20-year. You know, John, it ebbs away, a greater negative statistic, but I'm not sure we know where the canaries are right now. And again, we're like the Fed, we're like Clarida, we're like Faro, we're all ex-post, we're waiting for data.
We're waiting for new information too. Report from Reuters yesterday on the travel side of things that the US is developing a plan to require foreign visitors to be vaccinated, according to an official. Just seems like we might be lining things up.
What do you think about that, John,
on
LHR to JFK?
It's slow. It's really slow and gradual, Tom. There is a hope this can happen. I think there's a window, though. It's kind of got to happen between now and October, the end of October, because when we start to think about the traditional flu season kicking in, Tom, you get deeper into winter. Can you imagine an administration making a decision to reopen travel in a big way and say the end of November? That's difficult to get my head around at this point.
It's a scandal, John. I'm just trying to get to Chernobyl with Francine in early September.
I know there's some personal interest.
You know, this is just,
all round in different ways.
Yeah.
23% move lower, 24% move lower on the airlines, on the S&P 500 since April. It's been ugly. Your equity market looks like this. Up 10 on the S&P. We advanced 0.2% on the S&P 500. Yields in a basis point on 10s to 117.03. From New York City, heard on radio, seen on TV. For our audience worldwide, this is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Asset managers.
The world's financial decision makers connect on the Bloomberg terminal. The buy side and the sell side together, collaborating across markets and countries in real time, sharing ideas, negotiating trades, and forming an influential network of over 325,000 financial professionals that helps power global markets. Isn't it time you join them? Request a demo at Bloomberg.com/professional.
To seize change, to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know, with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President, Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at seic.com/seize change.
Tech talent is in high demand at Avanade, a joint venture between Microsoft and Accenture. That's why Avanade executive Brett Newton says the company is funding student scholarships at NJIT and earmarking them specifically for women in STEM fields.
What I really like about Avanade's scholarship program with NJIT is it's more than just a financial investment in the students. It's a relationship that we bring them into. We picked NJIT because it's a very different technical university. It's deeply rooted in solving business problems with technology, which is very much like Avanade. They're non-traditional in that they are much more focused and active in marrying technology to solving world problems and society problems. That's not normal of a lot of the engineering schools that we've had relationships with in the past. NJIT is very innovative and very entrepreneurial.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Moderna says its COVID-19 vaccine remained 93% effective through 6 months after the second shot. That level for the final analysis is just shy of the shot's initial effectiveness of 94%. The company's second quarter earnings and revenue beat expectations. The big insurer Cigna says it expects medical costs to go up, although its earnings beat Wall Street expectations last quarter. Investors are watching how the pandemic is shaping insurers' medical costs. As pandemic-related restrictions have eased, people are watching less TV. That's one thing Roku pointed to in reporting fewer than expected customer accounts for last quarter. It also missed on number of hours streamed. The company tells shareholders that the current environment is uncertain, but its chief financial officer said Roku feels good about the continued shift to streaming. We'll get another snapshot of the labor picture today with the jobless claims out before the opening bell. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
Asia is in a state of change. Political change.
The alternate appease of both Beijing and Washington.
Economic change.
Cotton production out of Xinjiang will have to drop.
Change that affects your world.
You're still, though, staying pretty bullish on tech stocks.
That's why we're here.
Is this the time to add to your positions?
Bloomberg Daybreak Asia. Tonight at 6 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Global market news changes in an instant.
U.S.-China relations also in focus.
So don't miss a minute.
Let's talk about the division of the ECB.
Download the Bloomberg Business app and stay connected to Bloomberg Radio 24/7.
Jay Powell is weighing in on the economic recovery.
Breaking business news anytime, anywhere. Bloomberg Radio. Broadcasting 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is Bloomberg Radio.
We've been waiting for vaccines. We've been waiting for the supply to pick up, and supply is exploding.
A pullback in yields could cause some of that volatility.
The Fed believes they have flexibility.
Our base case is that they tee up tapering perhaps as early as the November meeting.
In this world of great uncertainty, if you're pushed by what happens in 1 or 2 meters, you really haven't got the plot.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene, Jonathan Farrow, and Lisa Abramowitz.
Good morning, everyone. Jonathan Farrow, Lisa Bramowitz, and Tom Keene. A simulcast on radio and television. We welcome all of you. We launch on this Thursday into 2 key days on the American labor economy. And, John, it really underscores the two Americas out there, the worry about jobs, the angst about 7 million employees. And David Kostin at Goldman Sachs, he goes long America this morning.
If you came into 21 bullish, you made a mistake, Tom. You weren't bullish enough. And Goldman Sachs were bullish, tremendously bullish. They weren't bullish enough. They had a 4,600 year-end price target for 22. It's now 4,700 for 21, and he's not alone. Many have built that gain through the year so far and capitulated to a higher view over the last week.
John, I'm going to frame it out to Ben Laidler, looking for an unprecedented 3 years of double-digit equity growth, and you wonder, what is the equity market signaling about the challenges of an economy? And to me, it's a part of America doing really, really well, but everyone else, not so much.
Earnings are solid. They've been tremendous.
Yes.
We've seen that over the last several weeks. Financial conditions are easy. Central banks. Look, Tom, in 2021, hawkish. Let's define what hawkish is in 2021. It's a central banker turning around and saying maybe the conditions are right now to scale back QE from 120 billion to maybe 100. That's hawkish these days. I think that tells you a lot.
I mean, Lisa, you look at where we are in the jobs report. We've got claims coming out here, Lisa, in 28 minutes off. What do you call it, Lisa? Soggy ADP report yesterday?
Highly disappointing, incredibly disappointing.
Yeah.
It was lower than the lowest estimate. So that was a disappointing jobs figure. Yes, we care, because these are all the countdowns to the Friday jobs report. I will just say that there is a question when you talk about the David Kostin call and you talk about the economy that still hasn't gained steam yet. How much are we bringing forward earning expectations? How much are we bringing forward growth expectations? And beyond this year, beyond next year, what kind of returns can we be looking at on equities and on bonds?
John, 383,000 claims. That's a lot better than a year ago, but still not 290 whatever.
870 on payrolls. And if we get a downside surprise, Tom, is it about insufficient demand in this economy? Most people are going to say no. They're going to say it's about supply and supply-side constraints, and we need to see them ease, and September is the important month. How many times have we said that? It's a broken record now. September is the month.
I'm across, John. I just got a tweet in that I'm a broken record, so why don't you do the data check?
I'll get there right now, Tom. Your equity market higher, up 10, 11 points on the S&P 500, advancing 1/4%.
Nice
Yields taking a sneak peek at 112 in yesterday's session. Then a really hot ISM came through at around the same time that Vice Chair Clarida apparently was sounded hawkish. No idea what that's about. Yields in about a basis point to 117.03. Into the FX market, euro firmer, Tom. Euro dollar positive 0.14%. Euro dollar 118.54.
Let us stop. We need to stop the show. I said last night, and as we put the show together, I said stop. We need to talk to somebody and calm down about what to do into September, and for that matter, into September of 2022. Seema Shah is perfect with Principal Global Investors, their chief strategist today. Seema, can you own bonds?
Well, look, it's so challenging right now. I mean, 118, whatever it is now, it's very difficult to go long bonds at this kind of level. Now, look, of course, momentum can take you lower, but if we're looking at the fundamental story with strong growth, strong earnings, and a Fed, which, I agree, it's hardly, you can hardly call it hawkish, but ultimately they're moving to a point they're going to start normalizing. I think it's a really difficult argument to make to own treasuries.
Seema, global opportunities beckon. I've heard that a few times over the last few months. In fact, to be fair, I've heard it throughout the whole of this year. Why do they beckon now?
Well, I mean, look, there's a couple of reasons. You've got a global recovery in play. I think the most interesting part of this, though, is that you've seen it, a kind of a move from region to region to region through the progress of the vaccination. So we started with the US. Europe has had a fantastic couple of months. And to us, although EM is looking pretty dicey at the moment, there are still opportunities going forward. And then in this kind of environment where it's really difficult to make any decent returns, you need to be looking at where's the next thing which hasn't yet been tapped for that vaccine progress.
I've heard it from US-based investors. They like the UK. The FTSE's up 10% this year. I'm told they like Japan. Japan's done nothing for me this year. It's up about 1% on the Nikkei. Do you like those markets too right now, Seema? Is there a reason to pivot away from the wonderfulness of the US equity market that we've seen through the year so far towards the UK, towards Japan?
Yeah, look, it's a really good question. I think, like you said, Japan has been such a disappointment. With the global recovery, typically Japan should do well. It just doesn't seem to perform. But we do think that there's opportunities there for vaccine progress. a kind of a jump start again in Japan. But, I agree, it's difficult to stay excited about Japan. With the UK, I do wonder if they've had a bit of their heyday already over the last 6 months. We need to see more action from the government, more stimulus plans. What are they going to do from the fiscal side to keep this rally going? But certainly, the US does look good, but there are always opportunities globally. And, we know you need to be diversified, and there are other opportunities, Europe, EM, which is still beckoning for us.
Talking about the U.S., do you agree with David Kostin's view over at Goldman Sachs that we're looking at a 4,700 on the S&P at the end of the year and a 4,900 by year-end 2022?
So we are still very much risk on. We still think there's a lot to play for within equities, and for the same reasons that David's been pointing out, which is, if you look at the fundamentals, earnings growth has been fantastic. We're seeing companies showing real pricing power, which does fill us with some positivity going forward. I think the big question mark, as I said, is, of course, bond yields. And if we're going to get to that 2% level that some people are still pinning down for the end of the year, that's going to make it much more difficult. We don't think 2% is likely. It's a slightly lower level. And in that kind of environment, yes, US equities can continue to perform well.
Seema, can you walk us through a scenario in which bond yields get to 2% and the reaction function in equities? I mean, I'm personally confused by the scenario that will lead to 2% yields and then how that will trickle into equities.
Yeah, look, if put it like this, 2 months ago, if we'd then seen US yields hitting 2%, that would have been a steady rise through the rest of the year, and I think equities could have digested that. At this point, where yields are, for them to hit 2% now by the end of the year, that would be a very, very sharp move. It would be very disruptive, and I don't think equities could cope with it. But to get us there, you need to have the growth boom really once again taking off. You need to have the Fed clearly indicating that tapering is on the agenda, and you just need that momentum to be there. Now, positioning to us tells us that it could shift, right? That momentum could come through where you get a huge overshooting of whatever your fair value perspective is. But we need a lot of the stars to align.
Seema, the challenge here is our history of EM is a history of 1992. I'm guessing Ecuador, Mexico came along in 94, and on and on. Is the great surprise out there that EM falls apart as the developed countries adjust over the next 24 months?
I think so. I think a lot of investors, including us, we look at EM as a long-term opportunity. It's where your long-term growth forecasts are going to come through. And once, we've got COVID behind us, especially for those countries, then we would expect a lot of those benefits to come through. So, but particularly with emerging markets, it's just not a homogenous market. You have to be picking your countries, your sectors very, very carefully, because there is a lot of differences. And as we all know, politics becomes a far more important issue for EM.
Seema, we've got to leave it there. It's good to catch up. Appreciate your
Wonderful,
time. Seema Shah, Principal Global Investors Chief Strategist out of London.